Welcome to this resource created by the National Field Archery Society. It is aimed at both current and prospective coaches. The resource has been designed to help provide the necessary knowledge and skills required to qualify as an NFAS coach. You may revisit these resources as often as you like, but it is expected that you will undertake additional research and reading on subjects beyond what is presented here. The selection of an appropriate venue is covered in the course module, Selecting a Venue. Here, we will only look at the essentials related to laying out a range, but you're referred to the Selecting a Venue module for broader information. Similarly, details about equipment selection are covered in the Equipment module. Here, we will only look at the essentials which relate to range layout, and you're referred to the Equipment module for more detailed information. This slide will brainstorm the requirements from each of these types of equipment as they relate to range layout. First, target faces. Round doors may be useful to beginners. They concentrate focus on the center of the target, the point to be hit, applying the aim small, miss small principle. And they're also marked in increments. So if teaching gap shooting, they give a point to aim at for the second shot, which doesn't have to be imagined. It's easy to see the point on the opposite side of the center from where the arrow hit. This distance and direction from the center is how far the beginner needs to aim off the center in order to hit it the next time. Fun faces, for example pool balls or playing cards, can add variety, interest and fun for youngsters. Using fun faces as a throwaway competition at the end of a session may be a way to introduce the competitive nature of our sport to children in a friendly way. Animal faces can be used to learn the scoring system and as preparation for field course targets. Backstops. Several types of backstops are available. The most common, the ones that we're familiar with, are the foam bosses used in field courses. These backstops should be oriented with the wooden frames to the left and the right of the boss, rather than the top and the bottom. This may increase the overshoot widths, where the arrows hit the wooden frame and are deflected, but this decreases the likely overshoot length. Foam bosses can be quite heavy if you're not able to leave your kit on site. Alternatives, such as foam blocks or straw backstops, will have other benefits and drawbacks, including their size, stopping power, and cost effectiveness. Selection of backstops will depend on your specific venue. Bows. Recurve bows are recommended with very light draw weights. A length which the student archer can hold out in front of them at arm's length and draw without dropping their fingers against the arrow. You're going to need left and right-handed risers. More information about bows is contained in the equipment module of the course. Arrows. Aluminium arrows are recommended for a student archer's course. The arrows should match the bow used. Further details are left to the equipment module of the course. Barriers. Barriers are likely an outdoor range feature, but indoors a barrier may be made from traffic cones or cones which are holding canes, perhaps strung with barrier tape or with signs on them. Outdoor road pins hung with rope and barrier tape tassels are effective. Plastic electric fence stakes are light and may be cheaper than road pins. Barriers should extend behind any netting. Netting is usually hung in folds, slightly touching the floor, to absorb arrow impact. Behind the netting should be checked before the range is used, as it could hide members of the public or archers unaware that the range is in use. Netting cannot be relied upon to stop arrows. Indoors, netting should not be placed in front of a window, for example. Signs. Warning signs should be placed often enough to ensure that through traffic will see at least one of them. On the signs, warning archery in progress is preferred to signs using the word danger. What we're doing is not inherently dangerous, provided that people take care. Having shooting and waiting lines means that the coach only need deal with a specific number of student archers, say 1. Other students can hear what is being said and family are close by so that child safety is observed. Telephone. Test the landline as it may have become disconnected and always have a backup. In the woods, test your own phone's reception. Ensure that your phone is charged and preferably ensure that there are backup phones in the group in case of failure. First aid kit. The first aid kit should be in date and checked often. We don't administer first aid ourselves, but we do make it available. Everyone should be aware of where the first aid kit is in case they need it or in case they need to bring it. This diagram may be similar to your own indoor diagram in your assignment. Note each of the following. Signs. Signs surround the shooting area and may appear on the outside of exterior doors. Doors for preference should open outwards and not be openable from the outside. First aid kit may be seen in the storeroom behind the archers. This should be accessible by anyone at all times. The telephone appears in the anteroom in the upper left of this diagram. Fire equipment is inside of each of the side doors and it is not on the range. Barriers, indoor barriers can be improvised if needed using lines of chairs with signs on them or tables. The backstop net is away from the wall and from the bosses. The waiting line leaves space in the room for observers to stand or sit. And the shooting line has to have enough space between it and the waiting line to allow for shooting, allow for bows to be handled, turned, and stored whilst retrieving arrows. The bosses should be at a distance that allows the tuition that you wish to give, but be careful that there is sufficient height if you want to make use of a particularly long haul. This venue, as you can see, has a place to store equipment when not in use, which may be very labour saving. The diagram of the indoor venue in your assignment should specify all of the distances A, B, C and D. This is A, the distance from the shooting line to the waiting area, B, the distance from the shooting line to the backstop netting, C, the distance from the shooting line to the target bosses, and D, the distance from the backstop netting to the building's wall. This diagram may be similar to your own outdoor range diagram, which you will have in your assignment. Note each of the following. Signs around the shooting area and may also appear at stiles and entry gates to the wood. First aid, location should be known by all before entering the range. A telephone, your own phone should be charged and check for the signal and ensure that a backup phone will be available. Backstop net cannot be relied upon to stop arrows. In the case above, a high bank provides a natural backstop. The diagram in your assignment should specify the overall length and width of the range, the distance from the bosses to the backstop netting, and the distance between the shooting lanes. If you're really unsure about the beginner's windage, start them in one of the central shooting lanes. Consider running the perimeter barrier wider towards the target end of the range to allow for windage errors, which can be larger at a greater distance. Take the opportunity to guide your student archer around a woodland course. Introduce them to the safety of a woodland course. For example, having a whistle, always follow the course, move around the course as a group with adults at the front and rear of the group. Don't run, lead foot behind a peg, always point the arrow towards the target, no high drawing. Approach the target by walking to one side of it. Stand bows upright when drawing arrows, perhaps leaning against a nearby tree. Always leave someone in front of the target when searching for arrows, never walk back around a course, wear suitable clothing, etc. These lessons are more easily learned in the correct environment, where the common sense of the rule makes it second nature to remember. Routes around woodland courses. Explain what typical routes around a course might look like to a student. This is a zigzag path around the boundary of the woodland, shooting towards the boundary and walking away at right angles into the wood before shooting towards the boundary again. Tell your students about safe paths. If there are one from the course, this is normally a path through the middle of the wood, which you can access from any target and will lead safely out of the course. Courses may be laid in lobes or leaves, which bring archers past catering multiple times, which allows you to shoot through lunchtime and the course to continue without stopping for lunch. Tell the student archer how many targets they're about to shoot and how many are typically on a course. Take the opportunity to teach them about concerns over terrain, gradients and slopes. You might not choose to shoot a whole course the first time you take a beginner into the wood. An explanation about allowing for overshoots can be difficult because it's all down to the effects of the terrain, arrows bouncing from trees and so forth. For the champs courses, a 45-degree total windage is allowed for. Arrows may go 22.5 degrees further to the left or to the right. Drawing up parallel to the ground and loosing a 300 foot per second arrow theoretically gives the longest overshoot, but ricochets might also need to be taken into account. Care must also be taken to ensure that the overshoots do not overlap one another. Reading distances. Your student archer, using the gap shooting method, would like to be able to estimate the distance to a target and would appreciate some methods of doing this. Maybe you will lay out some of your shots with pins at distances that you know, that you can tell your student archer to give them positive feedback of using their gap and hitting the target. There may be other methods of judging distance. If there's a distance that your student archer knows, for example 20 yards, perhaps they can estimate the distance to the target in multiples of that. A common technique is to pick a point halfway to the target, try and estimate that distance and double it, or use a parallax movement of a nearer object to scale up the distance to the target. These are things that you really need to be in the woodland to teach. Shooting out in the woodland, consider taking the opportunity to teach your student archer the pleasures of brambles, vines, wasps and ticks. Searching for arrows. Leaving someone in front of the boss while searching for arrows has already been mentioned. Arrows have a center of gravity and a center of pressure, which is affected by the fletchings. The center of gravity or center of mass can be found by balancing an arrow on your finger, and the point moves that center of mass towards the front of the arrow, the pointy end. The center of pressure can't really be measured without a wind tunnel, but the fletchings move it towards the back of the arrow. The difference between the center of mass and the center of pressure, along with spin stabilization, keeps the arrow flying in a certain orientation, like a weather vane. When an arrow strikes a branch or the side of a boss, it's turned in the air and the student sees it sideways momentarily, pointing in a different direction. The arrow is rarely redirected but the centre of gravity is offset by this lever arm before it corrects itself, like a weather vane, and it continues along a parallel path. When the arrow's redirected, there's more of a swiping, extended noise than a cracking, striking noise. If an arrow seems to have vanished into thin air, then it's probably underneath the boss or the 3D. Advise your students to equip themselves with an arrow rake and a tool for removing arrows from trees and wooden frames. Whilst in the wood, there's the opportunity to teach your student archer many things which require a full field course. For example, getting a sure footing and adapting to the environment, not modifying the course. Things which will maybe be situation dependent, but you'll put together a little set of these things that you'll go through your student archers with as you shoot around your course, or maybe a local shoot that you accompany them to. Are there any other problems that you can think of that relate to range layout? In fact, there are many. Perhaps not as many as there are venues, but each venue may well have its own surprise features. It's impossible here to advise about all of these. However, your list of matters to resolve could be led by the risk assessment for the venue. For the written assignment, you're required to document with diagrams both an indoor and an outdoor range. Make life easy on yourself, and you can describe hypothetical ranges with, let's say, ideal door placement for indoor ranges, high natural banks backing onto ground which is inaccessible by the public and unused by animals for an outdoor range. Position on your diagrams, the fire safety, telephones, signage, everything that we've talked about in this course module, and that will get you full marks on this section of the assignment. If you have any questions or queries on the content of the module, please contact the Coach Training Coordinator at coachtrainer, all one word, @nfas.net.